Morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is nostalgia. Sometimes we wax wistful about the past, and oftentimes that past never even existed. So we get to talk about nostalgia and its impact on the present, and how we use it in ways that aren't necessarily beneficial to us. So good morning, Rosalind. Great to have you here with us this morning, starting off the week, going down memory lane a little bit. So welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel all the friction and the temperature and the pressure and the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to be here with you today. And we're going to talk about nostalgia. This topic came up because I was listening, I think it was on NPR. It was either on NPR or YouTube, I'm not sure. And they were talking about nostalgia, talking about this desire for times past, when life used to be simpler, or people used to be better, or values used to be. It was on NPR, now that I recall. It was so fascinating because they were talking about how the so many of the tropes that currently exist politically and socially have made appearances over the last 100 years with some regularity. Like the idea, we're going through a period now where there's a labor shortage. And so the thinking is people just don't want to work anymore. And they traced that through history. They traced it through like the past 100 years, and headlines and newscasts, and the refrain of people just don't want to work anymore. And so apparently it's not a new phenomena. It's something that has surfaced on many occasions in the past. And interestingly, they also traced the gender issues, because there's such an uproar now about gender, and feeling threatened by the fluidity of gender that we're witnessing. And they took this through the past at least 50, if not more, years as well, with talks about men becoming less masculine and women less, and becoming more feminine, and women becoming more masculine. And apparently this is another trope that has appeared throughout history on multiple different occasions, in relatively recent history. So, it's just fascinating when we talk about how times used to be. You know, we talk about maybe racial strife. Well, there was horrific racial strife going back and remembering. Good morning, good evening, Gia. Welcome, welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about nostalgia and how it's really something that is a fabrication in so many respects. And looking at history, but we can also look at our own lives, and maybe we're remembering selectively about our own lives and remembering or wishing for the better times of our past. I mean, I don't know about you, but frankly, there's no time in my life that I would go back to relive. You couldn't pay me to go back and relive it. I'm very happy to be where I am now, and once was enough. You know, I can't say that I have any of those golden years that I wish I could retrieve, unless I were to rewrite them with some of the life experience and wisdom that I have now. Maybe if I went back and had the vantage point I have now, then perhaps things might be somewhat more palatable, but there's no way you could get me to go back and do it again. So, you know, I wonder for you if you have nostalgic memories that haunt you, and you know, like going back to a better time, an easier time, a happier time. The likelihood is that those pinings for what was are probably quite selectively curated. In other words, they're probably lacking a bunch of the truth of what was going on at the time. You know, if we think about going back to the JFK era, people talk about Camelot. Well, it was also a time that was rife with incredible racial conflict and injustice and uprising and political murders and all kinds of things that were not at all Camelot-y, if you want to think about it. You know, we tend to want to repaint history, our own and those of our culture, with a very selective brush, I think. So Rosalind says, even hearing a song for the first time can make me cry or reflect. So there must be an underlying story operating for the emotion of grief or sadness to occur. 100%, Rosalind. So that's a really interesting observation. Music has the capacity to trigger experiences and emotions in us that are otherwise not so easy to access sometimes. And if there are lyrics to a song or even a tune that move you to tears, then that's a really good clue to be getting curious. It's a really good invitation to get curious and start exploring what might be behind that. Was it the words? Was it the tune? Does it remind you of another song? Do you have memories of a particular person or a particular time of life that arises? And maybe there's a longing Good morning, good morning, good morning, Jenny. Welcome. It's so good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about nostalgia and how oftentimes when we're thinking back on the past, we are looking at it through rose-colored lenses and either dreaming of a past that never existed or just selectively remembering portions of the past that that pull on certain heartstrings. So I think it's really important to look at the fact that the past exists. Oh, what is nostalgia? Nostalgia is remembering, essentially remembering, but with sort of a sense of longing for a time gone by. That's what we could say nostalgia is. But oftentimes what we're considering that time gone by to be never really existed the way that we're remembering it. And in fact, memory is quite fallible. And so that while there may be factual events of the past, that what we tend to embellish or interpret those facts and maybe even misremember those facts to then carry that past or that recounting or that representation of the past into the present, believing that it's true. So this goes back to our theme that is a recurrent theme of being very discerning about how you curate your story of who you are, your story of your life, your story of your history. Because these stories, it is like that game operator where it's whispered down the lane. And the stories change over time and become most likely more removed from what actually happened. And they morph and evolve in the telling, and our experience of them changes. So Jenny says, how would it be with rose-colored glasses, for instance, looking at photos from the past? So when we look at photos from the past, we're looking at those photos through the lens of our current perception and our current constructs. And what we're doing most likely is interpreting them, right? We're interpreting the expressions on people's faces. We're interpreting the body language. And most often those interpretations are impacted by the story that is operative for us, the story that we have. So if it's a family photo, let's say it's a photo of me and my sister. I don't have a sister, by the way. So let's say it's a photo of me and my sister, and we're standing next to each other. My sister's looking away and I'm looking up wistfully at her. So I could be looking at this photograph and I could be thinking, oh, she never cared about me. She's looking away, and here I am yearning and wanting her attention. You know, that's a story that I have made up, that I've said, well, she never cared about me, or whatever narrative I'm applying to this photograph. You know, or I could be looking up at her and in the photograph, and I could be looking at that picture and saying, wow, I miss the good times when we were so close. You know, so I'm applying the narrative. And that's kind of nostalgia. Maybe we never really were so close. Maybe the relationship or the closeness was something that I fabricated in my mind. Maybe she never really did care about me. Maybe she was just preoccupied with something else. Maybe she, who knows? Who knows what the truth is? But the fact is that we create these narratives, we create these stories, and then we act as though they're true. Same thing with nostalgia. So, I mean, this is what we're talking about is looking back on a manufactured past, for instance, creating a history that perhaps never existed. And it was fascinating to be listening to that NPR episode and to hear the same tropes that we are so familiar with right now. We're hearing these things thinking they're new, perhaps. And in fact, they've sort of cycled through history over and over again. And here we are again. I'm not saying that the circumstances are exactly the same, but some of the conversation surely sounds like echoes. So Rosalind says, the victors of war are the ones to write the history. Exactly. Whoever story it was, we can make peace with. If my mom has died, I can cultivate a new relationship. I was meant to, or was I meant to? Oh, was I can cultivate a new relationship? Was I meant to have a mom all the time? I see others in my life reflect those qualities and remind me of her. So that's a beautiful thing too, Rosalind, that you're bringing up. And that is that really in our lives, we don't get to pick and choose the parts that were the way things should be and the parts that were the way things shouldn't be. We don't get to pick and choose. Everything that has happened in our lives shapes us, and we would not be who we are without all of it. So I know that people want to be able to say, this part of my life never should have happened, or that part of my life never should have happened. But the thing is that you wouldn't be who you are if it weren't for all of it. All of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, all of it. Jenny says, I was wondering because I was looking at photos last night of grandson who passed away 3 years ago. And the thought of him being gone, sometimes it doesn't feel real. I totally get that, Jenny. There's so much of life, really, that as we think back, it just doesn't feel real. And what we have is evidence that it was real. It's this idea of memory is so fascinating because I remember growing up, I remember being told that I had drunk turpentine as a kid and had to have my stomach pumped. And years and years later, I asked my parents about it, and neither of them had any recollection of it at all. And I don't have any evidence other than that I know that story I grew up with. I grew up having that knowledge. So I don't know if it was true or not true. And there are other things that have happened in my life that I remember, or I think I remember, and there's no corroboration of those memories from others. So it's really bizarre to say, well, did it happen? Didn't it happen? And am I that person now that I was then? Yeah, I tend to think that I believe that they're just in physics, they say, and this is a gross oversimplification, but that everything that ever could have happened has happened. And in any permutation, which to me means that there's like an infinite number of timelines. And I tend to think that um, when this, I was so pleased with myself. So Jenny says, who says that? That's part of quantum physics, is that everything that's ever happened or possibly could happen or will happen has already happened. Like the universe is already complete. It's a kind of a wild concept. But years ago, I came up with an idea that allowed me to reconcile the notion of fate and free choice. Jenny says Bruce Lipton. Yeah, he's one of the people that says that. There are lots of people that say that. I love Bruce Lipton. He's awesome. So he's a big epigenetics guy, which means that we are not doomed to live out our genetics, that there are potentials beyond whatever that foundational coding might be. Anyway, reconciling free will and fate. So if indeed everything that's ever happened has already happened, then the way I imagine it is that there's a multitude of timelines, and at any given point where we make a choice, we get pumped into a different timeline where that choice is operative. And then that timeline has a particular trajectory until we make another choice, and then we get bounced to a different timeline. And the thing, and in our consciousness, and maybe we have a multitude of all these consciousnesses existing all at once. I don't know, but it's really fun stuff to play with. So Jenny says, is that similar to a parallel universe? I think you could say it is, that we get bumped into these other dimensional experiences. And usually the choice bumps us, if indeed this happens, bumps us into a timeline that is similar enough that we don't really notice that it's a different timeline. Every now and then, it's such a big jump that we have a deeper experience of it. And once I remember I had this pair of earrings that I always wore. There weren't matching earrings, and I always wore one in one ear because of the way that the stone was set in it. And then I woke up one day and it was the other ear that earring went in the other ear. And I was so convinced that it had been the other way that I went looking for a photograph of that earring. And of course, the photograph validated that it was in the ear that it was, the photograph had switched too, if indeed anything switched. Maybe I was just having a mental meltdown. I don't know. But I really had a vivid recollection that I had been putting the earring in the other ear for forever. So very, very interesting stuff. And it, one of my favorite conversations is the nature of consciousness and being. Like, what is this whole thing? Jenny says, I've had a similar experience. Yeah, like when we talk about a glitch in the matrix, it's like when we recognize that something's different. And how did that happen? And like we got picked up from one timeline and put in another. It's so bizarre and kind of super cool at the same time. Anyway, that's it for today's musings, talking about nostalgia. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on EWN, One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living, and Enlightened World Network. So Jenny says, I was just reading about the nature of consciousness. That's the best reads there are, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so much love and appreciation to you. I really deeply, deeply enjoy these times that we get to share together. And until next time, so much love.